Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I am Brigid Burke and it is now Saturday the 13th of July. And you will probably hear, I may be speaking a little more loudly today because it is raining out. And you'll notice I have more artificial light on in the background because, as I've mentioned, I don't like the ring light right in my face. I mean, there's sometimes when that's appropriate. Good morning. So this morning I am just, I'm trying to contend with the rain and the lighting in this room. And it's a no makeup day. So I'm just here. I think I got out of bed like probably an hour ago. And so I'm starting with this live stream this morning. Kind of dealing with the lighting conditions, and it does make me realize that as we get closer to the autumn and towards the winter, this time of the day is going to be pitch black. So I may have to adjust certain things like the time that I do this because I don't like a whole lot of artificial light on, especially when the sun's coming up and everything. So we'll see. Anyway, that's a future thing. So good morning and welcome. So today, what we're looking at, I was looking at the astrology for today. And we've got Moon in Libra today. We've got Venus is in Leo is opposite Pluto in Aquarius. And that's rather interesting based on some messages that I got this morning. Those who watch me regularly know that, or look at my website, know that I actually do some channeling of Archangel Azrael. And again, it's not that I necessarily have messages every single day, but I had an interesting message kind of come through this morning. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but it seems to connect back to that to some degree. And we also have Venus trine Neptune, and we also have the Moon trine Jupiter, which are both actually really good aspects. They kind of increase intuition, they increase conversation, they allow for people to come up with some new ideas and with good ideas. That is definitely the upshot. Venus in Leo, though, opposing Pluto in Aquarius, has a very interesting kind of a feel to it because Pluto in Aquarius, wherever Pluto shows up, it challenges whatever you could call the status quo is of that particular sign that it's in. And so if you're talking about Aquarius, Aquarian energy tends to be very, it can be detached. It can be a very detached but friendly energy. It is definitely very intellectual. It's definitely very future focused, looking at new ways of doing things. We often associate newer technologies and things with Aquarian energy. So things like AI and stuff like that might be considered to be part of an Aquarian future, or even just the ways in which we use technology for our future would be definitely connected to that. And when Pluto shows up, Pluto likes to show us what we'll call maybe the shadow or the dark side is of something. Now, to have this kind of energy that's opposing Venus and Leo, Leo, of course, is about its fifth house energy, so this has to do with creativity. It's usually the creativity, children, love affairs kind of house. But Leo has to do with our creativity, with our talents, and the way in which we are seen by the world, the way the world sees us. And with Venus, I mean, that's actually a very nice energy because it allows you to be, it certainly, certainly if I was looking at that kind of a thing in a horoscope reading, that would be in a card reading. Then if I saw a Venus influence in the fifth house, I'd be like, oh, okay, that's a really good sign for people looking for love. But I also think it's Venus in Leo is also this energy of where the things that we value or the things that we're passionate about, and the way in which we present those to the world. And Pluto in Aquarius is that tension. It's that thing that challenges us, that may make us question or doubt the thing that we are doing. So it's very interesting in light of the message that I had gotten this morning. And when I communicate with Azrael sometimes in different ways, but one of the ways I use is kind of like using the Enochian language, which is the language of the angels. And the word that came up for me several times this morning was Aziazor, which is a word that means, roughly it means likeness, okay? It means the likeness of something. And what the context of the broader context of the messages, just to try to, because to try to kind of piece them out as they were individually and put them together is it can be a little confusing. But in short, what he was saying was that there are certain likenesses that are put forward that are ending, and but he also said that there are certain likenesses that, as they are beginning, it's like somebody tries to put a boundary or a circle around them. Okay, that was kind of the way it was expressed, and the way I've come to kind of understand that is he's using the term likeness as almost like the face that one puts forward, the persona or a mask that one puts forward, what one's identity or one's brand, okay, or what one's message is, has to do with their likeness. And likeness can happen. You can be talking about a likeness on an individual level, like me here, and like what maybe the face I want to present to you, and what it is that I'm passionate about, that I'm interested in, that I'm showing to you, and how I work. Versus also what maybe is considered to be cultural likeness. So when we think about that in the context of something like social media, the likeness is going to be whatever the algorithm picks out to show to people. And I've always found it very interesting over the years that between this channel and the other one that I do, there's a lot of people who tell me, I get messages, letters, and emails, and not physical letters, but I get other kinds of stuff from people. People have even sent me gifts and stuff because they're all like, "Oh my God, I love the stuff that you do," which is great. It's great to know that there are people out there who are interested in your work and who support it. But if you look at the numbers, I'm like, these are not they're definitely not viral numbers. And they're not, and I'm saying, okay, I've had the Katonia podcast for 5 years and I'm barely at 4,000 followers. I'm like, that's not great numbers. Okay. And then there'll be people who will comment and be like, how come I've never seen this before? Like, is this a brand new pod? Like, how come I've never seen this before? Because there's a lot of stuff that's not getting shown. And part of that may have to do with, I may need to educate myself better on hashtags and things like that, which is probably part of the issue because the algorithm's going to pick out certain things. But what was interesting to me was that the implication was that sort of more, when we talk about social media companies, we talk about big platforms, we talk about Meta, when we talk about, company like TikTok, we talk about things like that, we talk about what's now X, okay? Now, allegedly, the way that X is now set up, supposedly, anybody with anything to say can say whatever they want. But it's still, it's kind of now become a system of, I think over there, where if you pay to be verified that your stuff is going to be put forward. Like there becomes a financial thing. You see this on Facebook and Meta too. Like you have to pay to boost your posts or pay for people to see things. And even then you don't know, I mean, it's picking out the audience, but you don't even know if it's reaching the right audience. You don't really know entirely who is seeing this and in what context. So, in any case, but what I thought was interesting, because I kind of did a quick search on kind of, okay, what kind of things do the algorithm promote? What kind of hashtags and things? And it's so interesting because aside from things like, I don't know, like Reel of the Day or FYP or something like that, there's also things like, that the main, like general hashtags are things like love, happy, peace, cat, dog, nice. It's like things that are kind of very nicey nice. And while I understand that at least one of the things is that when people look at social media, one of the complaints is that people don't want to go on and be stressed out, right? They want to go on and they want to see something that's going to make them feel, you don't want to be, doom scrolling, I think as they call it. You want to be looking through and just saying, well, let's just look at one bad thing after another, which by the way tends to happen anyway. Because another component of, I think, what is promoted is anything that it conveys a very extreme position or very extreme emotions, as long as they're within a certain context. Like if it's a perspective or a point of view that for whatever reason is not popular, or does not match what one wants. Like for example, if people are posting about the different wars that are going on, depending on people's point of view of that war, those posts may or may not be shown. Okay, or they may be blocked, or they may be, you know what I mean? There's different things that people put out there that may or may not be shown. And so that implies there that there is a kind of, we're not talking about a completely objective kind of an algorithm that just, maybe just looks for certain things and puts it forward. It's kind of like there's also a certain perspective that's being promoted. In theory, that should be a perspective that's based on, truth standards rather than people like just making crap up and spreading scary rumors. Okay. But I think that it's, but I've seen with a lot of people, and I see this a lot on, because I'm of that age where I'm still very much a Facebook user, I've seen a lot of people who are my friends, they'll literally be blocked, like they'll be in Facebook jail for 30 days for a post, and then they'll show the post that they were blocked on, and literally it might just be like, hi, this is me, like, I went to the beach today and I'm walking my dog, and somehow that post gets banned. And when you read the content of the post, there's nothing in there that's inflammatory, there's nothing in there that's false, there's nothing in there, but they're just randomly picked out, and it's just like, nope, your account's blocked. And then when people try to appeal it, I know that when I first actually opened this account on Instagram, it was interesting because it literally, every post, I would literally just put a picture of a sunrise with no commentary other than good morning. And it would block and say, this goes against our community standards. I'm like, what do you mean this goes against your community standards? It's like, how does this go against anyone's community standards? I eventually had to delete the account, and it was much later that I finally revived this account, which is why it's still, in theory, a little newer compared to the other one that I have. And it was just very, very odd. And you can't get around it, because if I tried to go and appeal that and say, there's nothing wrong with this, they would say, well, because somebody didn't report you, we're not going to say anything. We're just going to warn you not to post content like this again. And I'm like, what? How is this content that is not... And I would post the same content to my other account, and it was fine. So, yeah, it's very strange the way that it picks certain things out. And, but I almost felt like, for me, it was kind of like a message of like, okay, maybe not everything that people are posting or things that I'm posting is necessarily getting shown to people. So it says you need to kind of be aware that if you're trying to get a certain message out, there's a lot of people who might not be hearing it. That's really the sum total of what he was saying. Because in the broader context of the connection to Azrael, is that he seems to have things that he wants to say. And it's very odd for an archangel, to be honest, because they frequently, anybody who works with archangels, and I have different experiences. Like as I've talked about working with angels before, it's not something I've done really in the past. I've always dealt more in, I don't know what you call the catonic realm. I've always dealt more in dealing with more terrestrial, earthbound kind of, spirits, entities, whatever. I tend to deal more in that area or in the ancestral area rather than in dealing with what we would think of as celestial kind of deities. But I've been kind of pulled into it because it's like, nope, your work's going in this direction. So this is something, and again, I have videos about this on my website, transitionlifecoaching.net, so I don't want to rehash all that here. But dealing with this kind of, but my experience of what angels are from a more, I guess, esoteric standpoint is that when people do work to invoke angels or to get information from angels, they kind of show up. They're like, hi, what do you want to know? Oh, you want to know that? Okay, this is it. And that's it. They don't say anything else. They don't want to talk about stuff. They just kind of do it and then they're gone. And but this is a little bit different. I mean, they are still like that to a certain extent. It's kind of like, oh, this is the thing you're working on. Okay, well, here it is. Okay, I heard it now. Now do something with it. Kind of go away. They're not. It's a very much a no nonsense kind of energy that you get from them a lot of times, because they are, they're very much like, oh, okay, here's the thing, we do the thing, and that's it. So the fact that he has been wanting to say more things, it feels like that's more in the context of the fact that there is so much rapid change, and we're talking about a society that has, in a lot of ways, I'm going to say, I don't know if I even want to say evolved or devolved, because I don't know, but nonetheless, we've kind of moved. If you think about the states of society as being tribal, and then being more like a nation state, which still can have elements of tribalism, you can have nationalism and things like that. And then you have something that's more imperial, I suppose, potentially. Although one part of imperial is that it's oppressive. Colonialism can be very oppressive. Whoever the conqueror is, their perspective gets put on everybody else. the other piece of it is that when the bigger the area you're talking about, the more the ideas that come out of that space are what they call syncretized. So that means that you might have people of, say, multiple religious backgrounds who come together. Good morning, Suda. So people might come together of various religious backgrounds, and then, when you live in a syncretic society, everybody kind of gets to know each other's beliefs, and you find these kinds of melding together where you'll have you'll see it now, where you'll see people who are Christians but say have aspects of Buddhism in their practice, or if we look back to the ancients, the Greek magical papyri, it was like, okay, you had these spells and things that were they were like Egyptian, Greek, Babylonian, and had Roman names, like all kind of mixed up in the same thing. So then that's when you have this idea, that this deity is the same as this deity is the same as this deity. And, again, that isn't necessarily the case, but you have more of this idea that people learn other ideas and they try to see how they can integrate or fit them in with their own ideas. When you're tribal, then you pull back and it becomes no. It's like there's my idea and there's your idea, and, never the twain shall meet, okay? Or my idea good, your idea bad. You don't have my idea, your idea, enemy idea, right? I mean, we see an awful lot of this today. This is kind of how it goes. And it's very interesting to watch how social media companies are trying to walk that line. But in any case, this term that I got this morning about the likeness of things. So in other words, is what you're saying fitting in with the image of what perhaps the more global platforms feel is the message that needs to be sent, and how do you make a decision about that? Really, interestingly, it's the same kind of problem that you have when you talk about when we talk about freedom of religion. Okay, like in this country, we have at least for now we have freedom of religion, and the idea is like initially when you had people, I remember with James Madison, when somebody introduced a bill to have the government pay for, I think it was Baptist church, Christian education. Because most of the people were in favor of it, but he was against it, and he says, how does the government decide which religious education is the right one? Even if somebody had wanted to take the perspective of Christian, we want to promote a Christian perspective, which one are you promoting? Certainly years ago when I was taught in graduate school, there were over 300 different varieties of Protestantism, which, includes any kind of Christian faith that is not Catholic and is not Orthodox. Okay, Catholicism and Orthodoxy are and believe it or not, yes, they're two different things. That was the first split, was between what we think of now mainly as the Roman Catholic Church, although there are multiple Catholic churches as well. There was the Byzantine, which was more of the Orthodox. You have the Greek Orthodox, you have the Russian Orthodox, and you have different Orthodox congregations. That's another piece. And then you have, I think years ago they said there were at least 300 different Protestant denominations. There's probably more. So which one has the true version of Christianity? Because they will all argue that there's these just little doctrinal differences, but we're not all exactly the same. So how do you pick what the national religion's going to be? Okay, how do you do that without creating the kind of problems that people came to the what now became the United States to get away from? Okay, so so you can't, the government, that's why they say the government shall make no official statement regarding religion, because if you're living in a free country, who's to say, whose vision of Jesus is the right one? If you're gonna stick with Christianity, who's gonna say that? And people tend to forget that now today. They think that, and people who are not Christian, it's funny, it's kind of like, well, they talk about Christianity, even my students will talk about Christianity in a very generic sense, like the one that they grew up with is the one. I'm like, that's one out of many iterations. They may have a lot of similarities. You would assume Jesus is kind of a similarity there, but not necessarily. I mean, the way in which Jesus might be viewed, and everybody always says, we point back to the text. The textual interpretation is not that easy to do. So in any case, it's a very similar problem of saying, okay, what is the worldview that is real and accurate? Because we have lost the ability in a lot of ways to distinguish between what's real and what's not real. And when you are trying to stay on a track that is truth-based, you have to be careful too that you are not suppressing ideas. Okay, because people may be coming up with original thoughts and ideas. They may not be putting them forth as some kind of an ultimate truth, but people may still be talking about stuff, right? So this kind of gets back to what I was talking about today. And when I was thinking yesterday about what I wanted to talk about this morning, I was thinking about, first of all, about the idea of listening, and secondly, about the idea of cutting, okay? And I don't mean cutting in like a physical, literal sense. I mean like cutting content. So it's interesting that this kind of thing came up this morning, about the likeness of things and which likenesses are as soon as actually it was weird, because what Azrael said to me this morning is the more that likeness, that Aziazor starts to relate to what the actual picture is, the more that it's encircled, the more that it's a boundary is put around it, that, oh no, we're not gonna show this to a broader group, which is really interesting. Now I'm in the process of editing. I also have a publishing imprint, which is not, I mean, it's I have had people who are interested in my coaching ask about my books. I generally will point people to my academic book, but it's not something that talks specifically about my spiritual journey or anything like that. I write fiction mainly, and the fiction that I write is meant to probe topics that are sometimes a bit traumatic, because it's trying to find a voice for those kinds of topics. They're not meant to be light inspirational reads. So, which is why I tell people, like, the kind of, like, if I'm working in a store that's like a metaphysical store, or one that is, that mainly deals in spiritual type content, I'm like, that's not the stuff you want to carry in your store. I mean, that's just the reality. It's not something that's for everybody. But I also will occasionally take authors on my imprint, and there's two authors. Now, one of them I would take her on my imprint, but I think she is hoping to reach, I don't feel that my imprint reaches a big enough audience. If it's basically the other book I'm putting out is a book of poetry and images from my friend Ellen, who is on Instagram as Spiral Priestess, and she is, and to her, she's just like, I just want the book out there, because I don't care if just my friends buy it, so it's not a big, like I said, I can promote it as best I can. But again, when you kind of have a circle around things where not everybody is seeing that content, it's interesting how that ends up playing out, because then you don't know if you're going to have that broader reach. But while I was working on her book, we messaged each other back and forth, and she had told me that she had submitted a poem to a compendium, and I won't say which one it was, but it was basically one that has to do with women commenting on the patriarchy and things like that. So it was that kind of a anthology, and I think this editor wanted to get as much content in as possible. So my friend had submitted, Ellen had submitted a number of works, and the one that eventually got accepted, but they cut the entire middle out of it. And she was like, I'm not 100% sure how I feel about that. Because when you cut the middle out of it, it kind of takes the sense, it gets rid of the broader context. What she's trying to say in the beginning and the end of the piece is sort of explained by what's been discussed in the middle. And editors do that. Editors cut. Now, this other book that I'm editing, the person that I'm working with has another editor. And I suppose in context, this person, I think the book was originally meant to be kind of a YA book, young adult. And it's definitely not. I mean, the content of it is definitely more grown-up content, shall we say. Just because of the, there's some of the nature of it is just something that can be very, some of it's very emotionally visceral, but it's meant to make a point. It's meant to make a very good point. And she, her editor kept telling her, well, cut. You can't have all this. You can't have all this dialogue. You can't have that. So she finally said to me, I'm in despair because I want to give up on this whole book. So I'm like, so now we have an editorial arrangement and I'm reading the book. And I just got through like the biggest section and I'm like, this book is like, it's literally like a 21st century Alice in Wonderland in a way that it's written. But every single piece, every single little different scene that comes in tells you something else about the bigger picture that she's trying to explain. It's a really, really good piece on feminine archetypes and how that fits in with the way that we treat the earth, the way that we exploit the earth, and different things. And they are all, my whole point of my whole academic book is that those things all come together. Her point was just that, and she's doing this in almost like a science fiction type of a way. I'm referring to it as kind of feminist science fiction. But when she shows it to them, people are like, well, it's got to be shorter. You got to cut. And I said, we live kind of in a society, in a place where we want things in 3 bullet points. We want, when I worked in academia, when I was a administrator and I had to work with provosts and people, if I had a big project I was working on where you really did need context to understand why it was important to finance this or why it was important, just sum it up for me in 3 bullet points. You know, in the original thing with Twitter, when it was Twitter and it wasn't owned by Elon Musk, you know, what can you say in 140 characters, or even literary contests about having to do with, you know, write a short story in 140 characters, make it a tweet, right? And I mean, yes, there can be something challenging about what they call microdoses or microfiction, is what they would call that. And similar to poetry, it's like sometimes with a poem, oftentimes less is more. The less that you explain, the better it is. In prose, you want more description. You want people to say more, to explain. You want to be able to read the words and feel the scene that you're in. But everybody now is about cutting, because they say, well, nobody has the attention span to read a long book. Now, of course, things like Harry Potter, perhaps notwithstanding, nobody wants big books. It's like, no, people don't read. Nobody has the attention span. And that's another piece of it, because I think people are conditioned now, because there's so much information. I don't have time for this. Just say to me what you have to say in the shortest space possible, and make your point. And you have 2 minutes. You have a minute to make your point, and then go away. The other thing it reminds me of was a Monty Python sketch. If anybody ever seen Marcel Proust's, there's different. The French title is what is it? À la recherche du temps perdu, which I think is translated as either In Search of Lost Time or Remembrance of Things Past. Any case, it's like a 15-volume work. And it took me 2 or 3 years. I did actually work my way through it just because I was so curious about it. But there's a Monty Python sketch, which is the 15-second Summarize Proust competition, where you have to summarize, actually, maybe it's not 15 books, maybe it's like 8 books, but still, like, you have to summarize all of Proust's masterwork in 15 seconds. And it's hilarious. It's a bit raunchy too, but it's hilarious. So but that's kind of what I think about. It's like, okay, you have 15 seconds to summarize everything. You have 30 seconds in a reel to summarize what you're saying, maybe a minute and a half. I used to try to do something called Fiction Fridays, where I'd read from my fiction, but I said, even if I set the reel to a minute and a half, it's not, I need like 2 minutes, I need at least a couple of minutes to get through like a couple of pages, without me reading really, really fast and people can't hear what I say. You don't want to do that either. So we're not really in a culture of listening. And when we're at a time, what this all has to do with transition is that part of the healing process that we go through is that we need to have our voices heard, and we need everything to be heard, not the abridged version. Not the, I'm only going to pick out keywords and bullet points and I'm going to discard the rest of it. I've seen commercials now for AI where they're like, your 150-page presentation, we can distill it down to 2 sentences. Really? That's terrifying. I don't like the idea of having myself abridged in that way. I mean, yes, certainly, like if you write an article, you have to write an abstract, but the abstract's still like a paragraph. You have to. There is something to the summarizing process, but it's kind of like people who read the Monarch Notes or the Cliff Notes or now whatever the equivalent is online, Spark Notes, Lit Charts, whatever they are. Here's the summary version of the thing so that I don't have to read the thing, right? We've kind of gotten into that mode that we... Umberto Eco had a whole article on this too, where he talked about the... what was he call it? They called it Faith in Fakes, I think is what he called it. Where, there were he was also talking about places you can visit in America that's like a recreation of Venice. He's like, you've got the recreation here. Why actually go to Venice? It's that kind of a thing. And so when we talk about this idea of likeness, it's like, what is the image we're projecting? And how much are we more interested in kind of the fake glossed over version rather than really getting into the depth of something? And it's like, that seems to be kind of the common denominator. Anything that kind of gets into the depth, that tries to get into the details of something, that really allows somebody to have a voice rather than hurry up and tell your story in 2 seconds. We're going to give you a voice, but this is all the time that you have. That's curious, because it's like, because he was saying there's like a boundary that's drawn around, and so therefore you can never really get outside of a certain circle. It's kind of like you're there because if you want to discuss anything in depth, we don't have time for that. So it was an interesting kind of a message I got this morning. I'm going to do our card reading for today because we're at 7 o'clock. But kind of the overall point I think that I'm trying to make here is that there's this tendency towards slashing voice or cutting voice, or saying if you're going to project what your message is, you have to do it. And I understand wanting to have a message that makes an impact on people, right? But it, so that it grabs your attention. But at the same time, there's just there's listening and really paying attention. Whether you're talking about students in a university, or whether you're talking about stuff you see on Instagram, or stuff you see on any other social media platform, we want it short and fast, and there's no substance to it. And the question is, what does that do when you're not interested in substance? It makes everything kind of float on the surface, but if you start to approach what's real, it's something. And I don't mean real, R-E-E-L, kind of a pun there, right? R-E-A-L, what's real? Then it's almost like we don't want to look at that, Anyway, it's just interesting. This kind of came into my mind, and that's what came up this morning in my. If you join me a little later, that was kind of what happened with my message this morning. Was just like, the more real you get, the more you're curtailed. Was the message that I got. The more that you're kind of put in a bubble or a box, like you're not going to have the reach unless you kind of know how to, I don't know, unless you can put things in 5 words. So it's interesting that idea came up, but it does also make me think of the broader context of the person who wants to have their voice, who comes into a particular situation needing to talk, and finding that they have to reorganize their thoughts and they have to summarize. There's no place for people to just unedited being able to kind of say what they want, and which I think might become the role of therapy to a certain degree, but even the therapist cuts you off after an hour. And so when the creative outlets that you have, like I often will tell people, like writing is a good thing. This is great. I always thought brevity was the goal. Yeah, and again, in certain contexts, I understand that. But when you're talking about something where people are trying to authentically say who they are, this is always the problem that I've had with marketing myself, is because I'm actually kind of spread out. The stuff I do is spread out over a spectrum. You can't say, oh, well, your stuff is new age stuff. Oh, well, your stuff is this kind of stuff. Oh, well, it's just feminist stuff. Oh, it's this, it's that. It's not really, it's all and none of those things. And so then people say, well, you don't know how to market you, so, we just can't. And I think this is why I've resorted to live streams and stuff, because I'm just like, I need to be able to say what I want to say. But I often will advise people, write certain things out, and a lot of people, of course, feel they have to do something with that content. They have to show it to somebody, which they don't have to. But if you want to share it with the world, then it becomes, well, you have to share it in this abbreviated form. And the abbreviated form cuts things out. It's kind of like watching a video where people have just selectively edited it. And it's like, well, and we're not just talking bloopers and mistakes. I mean, people may just edit stuff out, and then you lose context. So it's a matter of being able to listen and be able to see what the broader context is. I don't know. That's kind of the topic that came up today. In our reading today, yeah, our first card here is moment to moment. So this is about being in the present, okay? So we have this energy of going with the flow of things. And the inner feeling here of which we're unawares, we have our King of Clouds again, control. So so when we're talking about control, oh, and good morning, Gina. This is a, so yeah, so right now they're talking about this space of kind of trying to be in the moment, but still having some aspect of ourselves that wants to be in control of something, that wants to have a plan, that wants to see ahead, that wants to know how to, wants to have control of the outcome to some degree. Our external feeling of which we're aware is creativity. Okay, so now looking at the big picture of this. So there's the things that we do in the moment. And this is pointing to control as the control versus creativity. So this is kind of what I'm talking about here. Externally, we have something that wants to be expressed. Okay, this is the Empress card. We have a seed that we want to plant, that we have something that we want to say, that we want to do, that we want to express. However we want to express it, through words, through art, through music, through some physical object that we make, through a plan that we develop, whatever it is we're doing. We have a certain amount of creativity. But again, there's that's what you were saying, Sudha, about brevity was the goal. We want to have, it has to be controlled. It has to be within a certain boundary. And again, I mean, for something to have a structure and a form, there does need to be a boundary. It's not that there's no boundaries. But oftentimes, the boundary becomes smaller and smaller. It's like, I have all of this furniture to fit in, and I have this much space. It's like, there has to be a control of the narrative. There's a control of what the creative output is, right? And when you're trying to be in the present, when you're trying to be in this space, and also the Two of Pentacles, let's not forget, is also a card of usually juggling things as well, where we're trying to do multiple things at the same time. And, but, feeling like we have to control it. That's one thing that, this book I'm editing, the author has said to me that, a lot of times, sometimes when you publish something that you feel is too bare or too real, you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't use my real name. Maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe I shouldn't do that, because it's just too, it may be too raw for some people. And so, the way in which we want to control the message, the feeling of having no space, the way in which we sort of try to hem in the thing that we're doing, right? And this brings about this guilt. So this is the Eight of Swords. It's actually kind of perfect. The Eight of Swords card is that wanting to be true to yourself versus having to control the narrative because the narrative has to fit into a certain box, or it's not going to be seen, or people aren't going to pay any attention to it because it's not in this box. So, and interestingly, our outcome, it's funny, we were having, well, this is an 8, I guess, right? But now we're back to 2s. Is kind of, this is the eagle soaring above all of it, like possibilities. And the Two of Wands also is a card of decision making as well. It's a matter of saying, okay, understanding that, here's what the parameters are. What road am I going to take? How am I going to get the maximum possibility out of something? How am I going to fly above the weeds of what's in front of me and be able to see, how does one see the bigger picture? Okay? And that's actually, I think, a really great way to kind of almost sum that idea up, because the idea is that you are trying to talk about possibilities. You're trying to talk about the big picture. You can't talk about the big picture in a confined space. This card in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck is a woman who is usually bound and blindfolded among like this little, these swords that are stuck in the ground. And oftentimes it's shown like it's like her arms are bound, but her feet are not. So it's almost like, well, there is a way out of this. A lot of times because we're too much in our head about it, we don't know how to break out of it. And that's part of the creative problem too, I think, that would be illustrated here, is that we get so much in our head about whether or not people are going to like something or how something's going to be. And you can apply this to non-creative stuff too. well, if I express myself in this way, and again, recognizing that we have to use, sometimes we have to be circumspect about what we say to people and so forth in certain situations. That there are social rules, but when do the social rules end up stifling your voice? That's where I think we're coming down to with this. When do the social rules stifle your voice? And what kind of possibilities can you see? Like, how do you rise above that? How do you fly above that and allow your voice to be expressed and allow it to be heard? But certainly then what this reading would be saying is the one way not to do it is to tie yourself up in mental knots of, will people think this? Will people think that? Because you can create your own boundaries. You can box yourself into a corner too by thinking, oh no, I can't say this because people won't like this. Maybe this won't sell if I say that. Maybe people will be turned off if they think about this. I run into this personally all the time because I deal, like I said, I also deal in... because I deal in transitions, because I deal in working people through transitions, a lot of the keywords associated with that, like death, which doesn't always have to do with literal death, but people will see that and go, oh no, I don't like that word. Association has to do with a lot. That's why I always say that words have this symbolic meaning. You could say a particular word, it could be the correct word, but if somebody has an association with it that's negative, then they may just automatically turn it off because they don't want to be associated with that. And the question is, how do you see possibilities? I did pull out the cartouche deck today, and I did feel like I wanted to do a quick reading with that. I've been turning these into 45 minutes. They're supposed to be 30 minutes, but whatever. I'll give it that other 4 minutes, and I'm going to do a quick cartouche reading too on this. Just not necessarily on this subject, but on what people need to know who are watching this live stream. Let's see what we have here. Well, set's on the bottom, so I guess that's good. Let me move this down here. Okay. So yeah, the nature of the situation, this is the Ankh, this is Venus energy, this is our life, this is lifeblood, this is our values, this is the things that have meaning to us, the things that we are passionate about, okay? And the point of interest is Lotus, which is interesting because Lotus is a card that often comes up when, it's a card of peace, okay? So it's a card of wanting to do things peacefully. And I think that's another angle to this, really, is that we want to do the things we love, but we don't want to create conflict. We don't want to be anxious about it. We don't want to say, if I express myself, will people not accept me, or will they not listen to me, or will they dismiss me, or will it be this, or will it be that? Whatever it is. Or, will somebody think I'm weird, or, whatever we think when we try to express ourselves. The Lotus card has a lot to do with the way in which we want to express ourselves, and the point of interest is to do it in a way that's going to be peaceful for us. That's not going to, we're not looking to create problems by expressing ourselves, right? Now, the factor to be considered is interesting because Scarab goes back to kind of what I was talking about with this tension with this Pluto and Aquarius energy. Things are changing. Things are changing. Scarab indicates new beginnings. This is a card of like endings and beginnings, okay? I actually say more than Seth, this is actually the true death card in this deck because it means there's transformations going on. Because the Scarab Beetle is associated with that renewal of life. So that's the factor right now. There are changes going on. So, okay, so if I step back and put that in the bigger context, we've been talking to people a lot in this live stream about you needing to find out what's authentic to you, right? We talk about authenticity of voice. Today we're talking about the ways in which voice can be curtailed or cut, okay? And getting people to listen. And what this is saying is, things are starting to shift and change. I mean, right now, yes, we're still in an environment in which the more that you say, the closer you get to authenticity, the more you might feel like you're being cut off by, say, an algorithm or by something like that says, this is not what people are going to be interested in hearing about. People are not interested in your voice, right? I mean, talk about the ultimate message kind of being sent there by algorithms or generative AI or whatever. But this would indicate that we are in a time of change. So what now might be considered to be the zeitgeist, I guess is the word, the spirit of the times, the whatever conventional wisdom, whatever these companies, because obviously companies are gearing everything towards what's going to make money or views or whatever. It's not really towards what's really true. But as more people want to start looking towards what's authentic and true, then there's kind of a point there that this kind of a thing may shift. And yeah, and we have air. So air is kind of saying express yourself in spite of it. Okay, air is about communications. It's about saying things. It's about being it's about communicating and detaching more from the outcome too. Because air is about not worrying so much about the outcome. Not worrying so much about, oh, if I write this thing, am I going to sell 1 million copies? Well, forget about that. Just worry about expressing yourself, right? Because ultimately we have Anubis. Now, Anubis is the underworld guide. He is the guide through difficulties. He's also a protective thing. And it's also, Anubis is also the one about kind of not taking something quite so seriously. I feel like Anubis comes up when we need to be diplomatic about certain things. You don't just want to, be in people's faces screaming either. I mean, it's like, yeah, you could do that, but I don't know that that's necessarily just because people don't. That's a type of thing that can be heard in its own context as well, but it's not kind of a general thing we want to go through all the time. We want something that's a little more peaceful, right? So it's a matter of finding the way to say the thing that you need to say, or finding a way to do it, finding a way to navigate that terrain and to navigate the obstacles to get to the change that we're actually moving towards. So interesting readings this morning on this subject. And I'll just pull one last. I have my Moonology cards out. I'll pull one last. I won't get deeply into it, but just kind of what's the message, the advice for today. Okay. This is interesting. Full moon in Cancer. And that's interesting. The full moon's actually going to be in Capricorn, but we're within Cancer right now. So a personal issue reaches resolution. That's interesting. So, yeah, I don't know. If this has been a conundrum for somebody, then that does seem to indicate that, perhaps things are shifting and changing. The way that what this card says in here, let me just look it up really quick. Full moon in Cancer. Things can get heated as the full moon in Cancer is a super emotional sign, so there could be something of an explosion of feelings around a now or a surrounding question. It's important to be sensitive to other people when you pull this card, as there are some very fine sensibilities. Isn't that funny about being diplomatic? So yeah, trying not to set things off or be explosive as you express yourself. The card indicates an especially feminine time. It also heralds a time to deal with family issues. Nothing to worry about. It signals a challenge coming to an end. And I could get into the way that family might play into this as well, but I won't go off right now. It can also suggest that both a domestic or a private issue will come to a head, or that it might be a great time to move house. The answer to your question lies in being a kind leader. This is a time for you to step up and overcome your insecurities. So there you go. There's your message of the day. Okay, so I'm running at 7:18. Thank you guys so much for joining me this morning. I know it's a Saturday. People probably want to sleep in, so I do appreciate everybody who gets up to join me. And I hope you have a great weekend. Like I said, if you're in the Northeast where I am, it's going to be get humid and gross, but until about Wednesday, and then it looks like we're going to have a break. So I'm looking forward to that. Everybody have a great rest of your week and weekend, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care.